This is the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 18th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, "In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Grant me justice against my opponent.' For a while he refused. But later he said to himself, 'Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" The Gospel of the Lord. So COVID has changed a lot of things for us. But one of the things that didn't change was the amount of spam email I get or the number of unwanted phone solicitors who constantly call or text my cell phone. No, actually, I take that back. I think COVID has made it worse. So many of us now do more work remotely that we're always on our phones and email, and the spammers, they know it. And so I am increasingly thankful for things like caller ID and spam filters. Still, I get lots of email, even from organizations that are not spam, and I am constantly having to silence my phone from callers which caller ID tells me is potentially spam. It's not potentially spam, it's always spam. It can be exhausting, and it's probably like this for lots of you as well. And so even though it may seem odd, I have some empathy for this judge in today's parable. Of course, he seems to be a nasty character who doesn't care about his duty before God or the people who he's supposed to be serving. But he does know what it's like to be worn down by the spammers and phone solicitors of his day. Yet he doesn't have any spam filter, and there is no caller ID to help him avoid it all. Conversely, the widow in the parable is ironically like the spammers. She just doesn't give up. Day in and day out, she is in the judge's face, even though, as far as she knows, it has about as much chance of working as phone solicitors who call my phone. And so when I read this parable, I find myself in an ethical conundrum. I know what it's like to feel like I'm being badgered all day long, and I don't like it. So I feel sympathy for this nasty judge who I'm probably not supposed to feel any sympathy for. And because of that, I so do not want to be a person who constantly bugs somebody else. So on a very visceral level, I don't want to be like this widow who's figured out how to be a constant pain in the butt. And I'm wondering if maybe Jesus set the parable up like this, partly so that we would feel this level of discomfort. And I wonder that because even though people didn't have phone solicitors or email spammers back in Jesus' day, people did know what it was like to be bugged constantly. They knew what it was like to be tired and worn down. And most of them probably didn't want to feel like they were doing that to others or even to God. And sometimes that is why people give up trying even when they shouldn't. And so Luke says that Jesus told this parable to teach us not to give up, especially on God, even if we think we're being a pain, and even when we wonder whether God is even paying attention. But not giving up is harder than it first appears. I really don't know what gives phone solicitors and spammers such perseverance. But as Jesus describes the widow and shows us through this parable with the widow what perseverance is supposed to look like, it's clear that the widow is, first of all, unafraid to state her case. After all, she's not trying to sell the judge something he doesn't want. She's just asking him to do his job. Day in and day out, she shows up and rightly demands, "Dude,
Do your job. And she says it, demanding that he do his job. None of this, oh, if it would please the court and if it's not too much trouble and I'll just make this request once and then go away and sit for 6 months and wonder if you're going to come back. She gets up every day and gets in his face. That's what she does because she is not afraid to ask for what she knows is right. And that's the other thing about this widow. What she says she wants is justice, not just her way. Grant me justice, not just my own personal thing. And so even though it involves her, what she really wants from the judge is for him to uphold the standards of the community. The word that is used here in the text is not actually dikaiosune, which is the Greek word we usually translate as justice, but it's a word that means what's right, what's equitable, what's fair for everybody. It can never simply be my personal favor, but it says, look, this is what's fair for everybody. Do that. Do what's fair for everybody, and that's what the widow wants. And the widow is willing to put her whole self into the request. Day after day, she keeps walking up to the judge and getting in his face. She doesn't just write a letter and hope for a response. So Jesus' question in the parable is really to ask us if we're willing to do the same thing in our relationship with God. If the widow is willing to do this with a bad judge who doesn't want to help, are we willing to show the same kind of perseverance with a loving and caring God? Are we willing not to give up on God, knowing that God doesn't give up on us? And for us too, sometimes that perseverance is supposed to be shown by the way we're willing to speak to God about what's important to us. Not only being unafraid to tell it to God over and over again, but by the way we ask God for help. It is sometimes shocking to point this out to people, but like in the Psalms, which are basically prayers, the Psalms always address God using the command form of the verb. God, give me this. God, do this. God, I need this. There is none of this stuff that so often we put into our prayers. Oh, Lord, that you might maybe please help a little bit if it's not too much trouble, that in thy mercy you might. There's none of that kind of stuff. It's just, God, this is what I need. Give me. Help me. And do this for others too. Are we willing to talk to God and really lay it on the line with God the way the widow does? And actually, when we do that, we communicate who we think God is to others as well, when we speak to God like that and when we ask God and when we speak about God in that way as well. Always bothers me sometimes when I hear these people who do these long-winded prayers in which every other word is the word just. Not just as in justice, but just. Oh God, I just want to ask you that you just might listen, that you just might do this thing, if you just would do this. It sounds like it's too much trouble, God, and I know this is too much trouble, and I want this itty-bitty little thing, and I know you don't really want to do it. That's addressing God like the unjust judge who doesn't really want to do it, not like addressing God who actually does want to help us and help others. For us too, Christian perseverance is supposed to be about seeking justice. That is, what's right. And are we seeking God's will for someone other than just ourselves? You know, it's fine to say, I need, as the widow does. But the widow doesn't stop there. She wants justice, and that means she's looking for God's plan for everybody and not just herself. And I wonder if sometimes we give up because we're asking for something too small. And this too small thing that I will ask for is about me. God, I need this. Well, it's not just about me. Am I asking for God's will for everybody, myself included, but it can't just be a small thing about me. Am I giving up on other people because I'm not willing to go to God and ask for them as well? And perseverance, this kind of Christian perseverance that Jesus lifts up with the widow, is mostly about involving ourselves in our prayers. It's not just about closing our eyes, folding our hands, and talking to God. If you're going to pray for something, Jesus asks, are you willing to work for it? Are you willing to get involved in what you're asking for? Are you willing to be God's instrument to make it happen? This is what Luther reminds us about in the Catechism when he talks about the meaning of the Lord's Prayer. He says, Jesus teaches us in the Lord's Prayer we shouldn't ask for God's forgiveness without being willing to be people who forgive others ourselves. And then he goes on and he says, and don't pray for daily bread if you're not willing to be a person who provides daily bread to others, which is what Joan was talking about with Gaithersburg Help, right? If we want others to be fed, we can't just sit here and say, oh God, please feed the hungry. We got to be willing to be people who get up and actually put food in the bins. Are we willing to be people who just pray for God's will? Oh God, that your will might be done by somebody else. Luther says if you're asking for God's will to be done, be the person who's willing to live God's will in your own life, to enact that in the lives of others. Getting up and getting in the face of God is not just about telling God what you want God to do, but being willing to be an instrument of God in the life of the world around you. That's what perseverance is really all about. And that is the kind of perseverance that the widow displayed, even if it appeared to others that she was just being a pain. It's the kind of perseverance and faith and prayer that Jesus calls us to as well. And it's the kind of perseverance that's worth the effort, because even when we are tempted to give up, Jesus assures us that God never gives up on us.